Welcome back to Track Talk. This is Game E of the 1830 tournament. It is being played by Adrian Keller Pierre, who happens to be, I believe, the tournament organizer. So I better be nice to him or else I'll get banned from my future tournament play. And rounding us out will be Romania Rail. I'm going to just make the executive decision to just call him Rail for this game because I'm not going to be able to pronounce that properly in the heat of the moment. So we'll jump in with Adrian in the auction. He goes for the Delaware and Hudson. Keller is going for the CNA. Pierre, Mohawk, and Hudson, and Rail rounding us off on the Delaware and Hudson. So the three most lucrative privates are bid up. Adrian is going to be contesting the Camden and Amboy, and Keller is overbidding on the Camden and Amboy. He really wants that private. Pierre is going to pull early, probably hoping that he gets an early M&H. Really shouldn't be allowed, which Rail is going to prevent. Adrian is going to be happy to take to Champlain and St. Lawrence. He is on the Delaware and Hudson and Camden and Amboy. Really probably wants to win at least one of those to be safe when the B&O comes up. We see the D&H now. Rail and Adrian are going for it, and Adrian wins it, so now safe. Probably pretty happy with his position in the auction. The M&H is now up, and we have Pierre and Rail again. Looks like they will take this up to 150, and Rail wins that. So Pierre is in a little bit of trouble for the B&O. So is Keller. Um, and basically, the CNA is going to be Keller, hopefully bidding this up so that he doesn't end up with the B&O. We'll see if that goes according to plan or not. Adrian throws in a bid for 200, and Keller immediately passes, says you can have it. 200 is not a bad price for the CNA. I think Keller probably should have taken it for 205. And when someone bids up to a number like that, it started at 170 and Adrian went right to 200. To me, that suggests that if you overbid them, they may just let you have it. Can't tell for sure, but definitely worth trying. So Pierre gets a little bit lucky there and isn't going to have to take the B&O after all with just $5 of private revenue. Although leaving the auction with just the Schuylkill, calling that lucky may be a bit of a strong term because you really don't have much of a private to buy in. Regardless, that gives Pierre priority, and in the first stock round, he will be taking the Chesapeake, pretty high float. Romaine or Rail is going to take the PRR. Bad news for Adrian potentially. He probably didn't anticipate actually winning that CNA, so he's pretty over privatized. He's going to have a little bit of a slow start. And then Keller getting a little bit of help floating the B&O from Adrian, but parted low enough that he was going to be able to float it anyways. So he does do that. And it looks like we'll be off to a 3-company float here. Adrian's just spreading the cash around a little bit. And we will go into the first operating round. B&O first operate is going to head south and buys 2 trains. So either has to token Washington or lay this $80 track to run both of those. We'll see what he decides. Not a huge fan of heading Washington, but we've discussed that on the channel before. CNO heading to Chicago as expected. PRR heading towards Lancaster. And it looks like they buy a single 2 train. So the only company with 2 trains is the B&O. Stock round 2 here. 2 of the players, Rail and Adrian, have cash for shares. B&O is being bought, and Adrian is actually going to pass and hope for priority, it looks like, which he secures. B&O does lay towards the DIT and is going to run for 90. Decent revenue, a lot of expensive track, $80 for those track lays, and at least is still sitting on his token. So I think that if you have to lay south, at least try and avoid tokening it, which it seems like he's of the same opinion. Pierre links up with Chicago and pays it out. PRR gets into Lancaster, tokens it, and is running his train for 30. Buys another 2 and does not buy into privates. So a little bit of a slow start, but we will see if Adrian's able to sell out here and float his own company, which will probably really get us off to the races. He's going to buy the B&O and trash it. Keller is buying a CNO. Pierre buys the trashed B&O, and Rail going back for his own PRR. What is Adrian going to get up to here? Buys up a second share of the CNO, trashes it. So it looks like his MO for the stock round is going to be buy a share and trash everything in one place, or 2 places, I guess I should say. Everybody else is passing, letting him get away with this. He's going to go a little bit harder on the PRR than he did the other companies. Actually buys 4 shares and trashes it into yellow. Not the end of the world for Rail. It's going to lock up a lot of liquidity for when he buys his M&H, but he does have a full market here and 100% of that revenue. So not terrible to have yellow shares early in the game. Adrian now with $441 is going to be parring the NYNH. And I think the rest of the stock round is just going to be that floating. He's not able to sell and buy anything else because he's already trashed all those shares. We're into operating round 3. Still not in green. B&O has no track and it's going to run for 100, which they pay. C&O lays the number 2 and is going to buy in his private, but it's just the Schuylkill. So I don't know that he really needed to be highly motivated to do that. It makes it very easy for Adrian and Rail to buy in their privates for only $40 of value to him. I suppose you could be worried that people float storm and then you don't have a 3, so you fall back trainless. Seems pretty unlikely. He's parred pretty high, so they would both have to operate in front of him and buy a lot of trains to make that happen. And also, if you don't buy a 3, that's just yet another 3 that has to be purchased before the 4 comes out. So I don't know that he really needed to be motivated to buy that $40 worth of private. It does give him enough money for a share, so maybe that would be the difference between a share or not. Although if he has 113 already, $40 in addition, sorry, $40 of that 113 probably is not the difference maker in whether or not he can afford a share. NYNH lays towards New York, buys a 3, buys his privates, and is able to buy them for almost their full value. Loses $10 in Champlain and St. Lawrence, but is able to fully deplete this company. Very good situation for Adrian. And Adrian, I think, has priority here. No, he doesn't. Okay. Going last in priority. I was going to say, if he could get that NYC, that would be quite a nice start for him. Rail gets the Philly upgrade, doesn't block himself, and will buy in his private and a 3 train. Stock round 4, Adrian has a ton of cash, almost $600, and Rail is close behind at 300. The other 2 players are trailing. Keller buys a cheap PRR. Pierre passing, maybe just hoping to snag some cheap shares after these other players sell out. Rail is going to buy paying shares. Doesn't look like he's interested in floating just yet. And Adrian does get to secure that NYC. So the NYC NYNH synergy is very strong. He does have a liability here in a very weak treasury in the NYNH, but off to a pretty explosive start. Pierre still passing. Rail buying an NYNH. Interesting. I would be anticipating this company withholding with that weak treasury. Surprised we don't see him pick up a C&O, for instance. NYC still floating. Rail is sitting on cash. So 2 players are sitting on cash. May see some trashing at the end of the stock round. NYC is floated. And Rail is going to buy an NYC and just sits on it. Okay. Interesting decisions in stock choice from Rail there. Two kind of weird purchases potentially. NYC lays his home, links into New York, no surprise there, and does something that is very aggressive, buys the 2 3s and the 4 to rush trains. It's always tempting to do this, but it really depletes your treasury. It does force the B&O to fall back, which is very painful for all these players that are invested there. But you do have to worry now if you're Adrian about permanent trains. You got $240 across 2 companies. You're probably going to be train locked because I assume you want to run 2 trains at both of these companies. You form this double loop into New York and have pretty good revenue. But that does leave you vulnerable for the train rush. So he needs to probably withhold at least one of these companies. He does have really massive private income on the NYNH, so he's going to have $100 just from private income, which is nice. But again, with 2 companies, you need at least $900 to get permanent trains, probably more unless everything goes exactly your way. So, and he's going to have to pay to upgrade New York to run all of his revenue. So, yeah, high risk, high reward strategy for sure. B&O falls back as noted, upgrades his home. There's another 4 off the market. C&O heading over to Lancaster. We'll see who gets there first, B&O or C&O. Pays for 80, NYNH. Upgrades Albany. Doesn't have the money for the New York upgrade anyways. Pays it out. Buys a 4 across. So leaves himself token money in the NYNH and gets a 4 on his trailing company, which is more likely, I suppose, to fall back if the 6 comes out. Reasonable. I wonder if he should have just bought over the train for all of the revenue in the NYNH, just because he's going to have $50 of private income here. So he's going to get the token money in the next operating round, and it's nice to have your cash kind of consolidated when the permanent trains come calling. PRR, lays Lancaster, and CNO is up first. And as a result of the BNO falling back, he's going to lose out on this Lancaster token. That's a big deal. That's a big consequence of Adrian's decision to buy the 4 train on the NYC, change his operating order, which is going to reverberate throughout the game for Keller. Pierre laying Pittsburgh snags the Lancaster token, off to a good start there. He's going to run for 90 and pay it. NYC, 2 trains, but only able to run one of them because just didn't have enough track points to bring out the full loop here. So a little bit unfortunate for him. Runs for 100. B&O. Upgrading Washington, and actually does drop the token here. Must have done this at an earlier stock operating round. I missed that, and I don't fully understand that. Maybe it was when he had multiple trains before the 2s rusted. But this is going to be painful in the late game, and especially the fact that he fell back. I'm not sure exactly when he tokened that. We can look back. He didn't do it last time. Must have been in operating round 3. So the fact that the 2s never ran is probably very painful for him. He's off to a rough start. Pays out 130. NYNH completes the loop and will run for 190, which he pays. PRR's last operate, linking up with Baltimore instead of laying the Reading and Allentown. That's a little bit surprising. Does increase his revenue because he's got a good 3 run. 120 pays it out, stock round 5. Adrian has managed to keep priority into this stock round as a result of Rail buying that NYC share at the end of the game, end of the last stock round, and has a lot of cash. So even though the NYC only operated once, his revenue was high enough to keep him in contention with these other players. He's built up a fair share lead on Keller and Pierre. Rail is a little bit closer both in net worth and shares, but Adrian is off to a really good start here. Needs to navigate these permanent trains. Otherwise, his net worth is going to be dropping when he has to out of pocket some trains. He is going to continue to play quite aggressively and actually floats the Erie, or pars the Erie. I don't think he's going to be able to float it, but he's going to reserve that presidency. And that was kind of the last good potential company. CPR is not great. B&M is kind of dead when the NYC and the NYNH are working together. So he's going to deny that to other players. If they try to steal that from him, he does have the liquidity to defend all 3 presidencies with a sale of the NYNH or a sale of the NYC, and then 1 purchase already in his treasury. So I don't think people can try and steal it from him. They're going to have to decide whether or not they want to just buy paying shares or if they float their own companies. Keller going for the lucrative NYC, no faulting that. Pierre is going to sell out, and he's going for the B&M. Pretty low par. I suppose that with the C&O treasury being pretty full, he's not too worried about his permanent trains, but the track potential for the B&M is really not that great. Rail is going to also sell, and it looks like he's going to be floating the CPR, floats it for max. The CPR is not a safe suitcase for him. His opponent Adrian controls the Champlain and St. Lawrence. So I think if you're Rail, you probably have to hope that the 5 trains come out before the NYNH operates, which seems unlikely. There's 2 4 trains facing. So in order to ensure that, you might have to buy both of the 4 trains with the CPR. Otherwise, I suppose if you buy just one, Adrian might be tempted. Well, actually, I take that back. Adrian's not floating the Erie. At least we don't think so. So really, if the CPR floats, the NYC is not going to buy 5. The CNO could buy 5, but only if the CPR buys both 4s. So maybe that's Rail's strategy, is to ensure the suitcase by buying 2 4s, but that's $600 of your $1,000 revenue consumed. That makes the suitcase a lot worse. I don't know. I think probably would be better off just buying paying shares here. Adrian is going to buy a paying B&O. Pierre still floating the B&M, and looks like Rail is floating the CPR. So the rest of this stock round should be pretty quick, just a float. Both companies are floated, and this will leave Adrian with priority again. So he's getting a lot of help from Rail here in terms of staying early in the stock round. Was only able to snag the CPR, or sorry, the Erie in the last stock round because Rail went back and bought that NYC share. CPR is going to lay track, leaving himself the opportunity to run this company if he needs to, but probably hoping he doesn't. Buys a single 4. CNO gets into New York via Reading and Allentown and pays out 120. He doesn't have the cash to buy the 4 and the 5. So as expected, I don't think we're going to see the 5 come out before NYNH has the opportunity to lay Burlington. NYC heading over to Rochester, does get to run both trains. 190 pays it out. Probably need to see Adrian withholding at least once or twice on one of these companies to survive the train rush. B&O going to pay for 140. NYNH links up with Rochester. Still hasn't dropped his token. I suppose now that he controls the Erie, he's not too worried about tokens coming out on Albany. The B&M might be a threat in the future, and there's really no way to keep a B&M out of Albany that's determined to get there. There's 3 of the Brown cities, so if he lays this $120 track, he's pretty guaranteed to get an upgrade for that. And alternatively, he can lay this $120 track and get there pretty easily. So I think that the idea that the NYNH may not have to token Albany is misguided. I think that's definitely going to be the case, that he has to do that. But holding off for now. And it would be super nice if he didn't have to token that now that he has the Erie, because the Erie can also run into New York through all this track. I don't think the other players are going to let him get away with that, though. CPR, suitcase is broken as predicted. He withholds 210, so Treasury is looking a lot more healthy. And again, he's got $50 of private revenue, so if people aren't buying 5s, he's going to be just fine. PRR upgrades Pittsburgh, runs for 120, pays it. First operation of B&M, just going to lay his home. Probably wants to see how this develops before he pays expensive $120 track. Buys a 4, exposing the 5s, and then he shuffles a bunch of money into the C&O, which leaves the C&O exactly enough for 2 5 trains. So CPR gets a 5, C&O gets 2 5s. That's pretty bad news for Adrian. Adrian did shuffle a train out of the NYC. I don't think we talked about that. So he has enough money for a 5 train, but I don't think it's going to get to him in terms of operating order. He's only at 82. The CPR, even though it fell back, is going to operate first. Bad news for him. So his aggressive play may come back to bite him here. CNO, going to buy 2 5s. And there's the second one. CPR is laying towards Ottawa, snags the last 5, and now the NYC has a 3 train but cannot afford a 6, I don't believe. The saving grace for Adrian here is that he does have a 4 in the NYNH, so if the 6 does come out, he is not going to be forced to buy the 6 and then the D, in which case he would just bankrupt and lose, I think. So the 4 train ends up being quite important. He upgrades New York, has a decent run of 130. With a withhold, would that have been enough? No, he would have been $10 short. So couldn't have bought the 6 there if he wanted to. B&O gets the Philly upgrade and tokens it. So his track is actually good, despite throwing away a Washington token. For now, he's set. He can run Lancaster all the way back down into the offboard if he wants. Pays for 190, withholds it. PRR upgrades Lancaster, 140, pays it, and he's going to shuffle a train out of the CPR. CPR just has a 5 now. So PRR has 2 trains, probably hoping that the 6 doesn't come out here. NYNH heading towards the Erie home. This is a company that Adrian has previously reserved. Runs for 250 and pays it, so not overly worried about the impending 6 train, it sounds like. B&M is going to upgrade his home again and running for just 70. Stock round 6, Adrian is first in priority. He's been first in priority for, I want to say, the last 3 stock rounds or something like that. Really good for him. And he's got enough money now to float the Erie if he wants to. He also has a pretty big share lead and is far ahead in terms of net worth. Now, of course, when these rusting events occur, he's going to be in a little bit of trouble. He's been playing pretty fast and loose. Does have basically permanent train money in the NYC, and when the Erie floats, he will have another permanent train there, but he's going to need 3 of them. He buys a C&O, not in a rush to buy the Erie. The C&O with 2 5 trains could be a monster, especially with the track developed as it is. If this upgrades, he's going to have 2 runs into Philadelphia, can hit New York, can in theory maybe even reach Chicago. That might be a stretch. I don't know if he can hit Philly and Chicago with just a 5 train, probably not. But yeah, these shares are definitely high value, so pick those up before floating the Erie. Keller, Gonna buy a CPR of all things. That's a much less valuable share. Pierre going for the C&O makes sense. Rail is going for the NYC again. I'm surprised that they're not picking up the C&O. Why not? Adrian is going back to the Erie. I think he doesn't have enough cash to float it if he buys another C&O, but maybe should have considered selling something else. PRR, for instance. Keller is going to buy the NYNH. Pierre, kind of out of cash, going to sell a B&M to buy something else, and will pick up a PRR. Rail is going to buy another NYC. Is he hoping to be dumped on? If he leaves Adrian with priority and 2 shares in his lead company, could end up solving his train liability with a dump. I think it's unlikely that Rail is going to be behind Adrian in priority, though, because Adrian has telegraphed that he wants to float the Erie. So Adrian's going to sell a B&O and buy another Erie. I am kind of surprised that this C&O is not being bought out. It is a dump risk, I suppose, but it's already a dump risk, so why not just buy the other share? Everybody's passing. Actually, Rail is going to say something about that. He trashes the B&M and goes back for an NYC, so he really wants to be involved in that company and just trashes it. Okay, so I think he's hoping for a bankruptcy. Maybe he thinks he'll win if Adrian gets forced to buy all these trains and bankrupts. I think that's not a safe assumption. Pierre is going to be running the C&O for sure, and his net worth is going to get a huge leap when that happens. So if there is a bankruptcy, I think Pierre is probably going to come out on top. And Rail has just sold a bunch of shares, so his share lead is evaporated, and it's now more likely that Adrian does end up with priority, which is crazy. Another Erie comes off. 2 players passing. Rail is passing on almost $300. Erie is floated, sold, and Adrian, actually, Rail is going to buy an Erie, okay. And Adrian buys a PRR. I wonder why he didn't want that last C&O. I must be missing something there. And Rail is still buying shares. He's going to trash the Erie and give Adrian priority again? That's crazy. That does not seem like a worthwhile trade. Adrian has been given priority way too often in this game. Rail is finally done buying shares, and we are into the operating round. CPR is first up and is going to upgrade Ottawa for the cash. Runs for 90, pays it. C&O is going to run 2 5 trains again. This needs to be shut down by the players. If Pierre gets to run that too many times, he's just going to win off the back of that. In order for him not to have to do that again, the D train is going to have to come out to force the B&M to buy a train across. That is going to be a little bit of a tall order. I don't know who brings out the D train here. I suppose if Adrian buys a 6 and then goes for the D train upgrade on the Erie, that would put his New York in a lot of trouble here. He does have the option of trying to suitcase the Erie. The Erie suitcase is usually a fail, but when you are the only player with access to this track and you've got all these track points allayed against your opponents, it's a lot more viable than it usually would be. So that would be an option to shut down Pierre. PRR upgrades Baltimore, runs for 190 and withholds. And I suppose if Adrian doesn't bring out the D train, looks like Rail is going to be pretty close to doing it himself. First 6 comes out. That's bad news for the NYC and Adrian in general doesn't get to run that 3 train. I did not anticipate that. NYC heading over towards the double O's is going to just emergency buy. It looks like it. Fortunately for him, he doesn't have to sell shares. NYNH, as noted, has the 4 train, so he's at least not going to be falling back and actually has a decent run of 170. B&O is up and has a 4 train. We'll need to find a permanent train in the future, and for that reason is withholding. Erie's first operation does look like he's at least setting up for a suitcase temporarily here, and we do see the D train come out. So Pierre is in trouble on the B&M and is going to lose out on that double 5 train run. Bad news for him. Back to the CPR, heading over to the double O's. I don't think he's going to be able to get there before the NYNH and NYC collude to lay those double O's and token them out. I will note that the NYNH did end up leaving the token on Albany. If the Erie is suitcased, I guess that's fine to do. He doesn't have to worry about anybody cutting his runs this way. And the Erie doesn't run into New York, of course, if it's suitcased. CPR pays out 90. C&O, much worse run all of a sudden, just 240 pays it. PRR with the new 6 train has a decent run, 240. NYNH is going to have to shuffle a train out of the NYC, which is unfortunate operating. Actually, can shuffle it out of the Erie, so that train wouldn't have run anyways. That's not too bad. He does buy it from the Erie, okay. NYC is laying the double O's and runs for 240, buys the train out of the NYNH. And I think this is actually going to work out great for Adrian because the NYC and the NYNH have swapped places here. So the NYC is going to get to run both of those trains before the NYNH has to buy one across. And the NYC may have better runs. Right now, their runs are the same, but the NYC is the safer long-term company because it has the tokens. So you probably do want the D in that company. Keller, single presidency player, is going to be forced to emergency buy a D train here and has to sell very heavily. So I think he's eliminated from contention here. Just going to make sure that the D or the B&O is not up for grabs. No, he did not have to make the B&O vulnerable in order to afford that. So good for him. Bad for the other players in the sense that they're not going to be able to steal that permanent train. Erie is still setting up for the suitcase. B&M first run with the 5 train runs for just 70. He is off to kind of a rough start. He did have to lay or withhold in order to lay any track. With the amount of track points available to Adrian, I don't think the B&M is going to get a New York run, but we'll see. CPR realizes he doesn't really have a chance of getting into those double O's with Adrian having 2 companies. He's going to settle for the offboard here. Still paying for 90. C&O looks like he's heading up towards the double O tiles. And in theory, this suitcase is still not secure. So if these players all collude and use all their track points, the C&O, the PRR, and the B&O, they could lay Erie and then upgrade this track to give him a run. Adrian, fortunately, has companies operating in between those 3 companies that would have to collude. So he should be able to set that off or block that. He would have to, well, he can block him at Erie very easily in the NYC. But long term, probably wants to lay a sharp curve here, and then there's just no valid upgrades for the Erie, and he's safe. Doesn't have to worry about it anymore. But I think he's fine. I think the suitcase is going to be... He actually links them up. I did not expect that. Wow. Okay. Could have blocked them very easily. He tokens, so he does block them. I suppose that's a better run for the New York. Is it? Well, by $10, because you can run for 100 here, and these 3 tiles would give you 110. So marginally better. No, actually, it's a fair amount better because I was neglecting the double O. So it is a better run. Okay, fine. Runs 2 trains. And actually, now that I think about it, he really wanted that because he has 2 trains in this company. So this token allows him to run the 6 independently of the D. So that does massively increase his run, that token. Okay. I was skeptical at first, but I see the logic. 420 pays it out. PRR is looking to get into Chicago. Pays for 240. NYNH is going to fall back again, but didn't lose the actual run, just losing a little bit of net worth because the shares are depreciating. buys the 6, and gives the New York all of its treasury. So the New York actually has token money for both of its tokens still. That's really nice. BNO is going to, I guess, look to get into the other offboard, Gulf, potentially. With the D train, probably do want to run Columbus and then Gulf instead of get into Chicago. A little bit more revenue. 350, decent revenue, but had to sell so heavily. I think he's done. Erie, still suitcased. B&M does lay the track on Providence, and we'll see if Adrian is able to block that. Pays for 100. We're into stock round 7. So if we look at the game state here, the net worth is pretty close actually between Rail and Adrian, but Adrian has a 6-share lead, has no train liability at this point, and has much better runs than basically anybody else. So Adrian is the clear favorite. Keller has been eliminated. Pierre is hanging in there, but he's got even less net worth and less shares than Rail, and his company's runs are kind of, I guess, equivalent to Rails. The B&M and the CPR are pretty similar, and then the CNO and the PRR are dead even. So similar map position and portfolio net worth, I guess, but a little bit worse for Pierre in terms of net worth. Adrian has his pick of the litter. He has been first in priority this entire game, and really has been reaping rewards from that. So I imagine he wants to just pick up his own NYC here. There are yellow shares. He's got 4 shares until he hits his limit. I don't know that the B&M needs to be prioritized. He's going to sell his Erie, gets even more cash there. That's fine. And he does buy the B&M. Okay, so he really wants those yellow shares. He's going to try and make sure he has the most shares in the game. Keller is going to buy a CNO. Pierre buys the B&O. Cheap B&O shares are also attractive. I wasn't looking in that area of the screen, but $350 for just $67 can't be turned up. Can't turn your nose up at that. Looks like Rail is going to take the same strategy as Adrian and buys the B&M. Adrian should be going back. I don't like the idea of buying these IPO shares. Really should just be picking up these higher revenue shares, I think. Keller picks up a PRR. If someone was going to be picking up cheap shares, it probably should be Keller. He doesn't have enough cash to afford these more expensive ones. Pierre is buying the B&O still. Rail going for the B&O, only 1 share left there. Adrian still dead set on this B&M. This is heavily dependent on Pierre actually withholding to keep this yellow. The B&M is already on the cusp of leaving yellow, will float out of it. So he's going to have to withhold twice to stay yellow. These shares are not that attractive, I don't think. The revenue's bad, and there's going to be a lot of withholding to see the benefit of these yellow shares. I think this is a mistake from Adrian. Keller buys his last share of the NYNH. Pierre is going to buy the NYC. That's an attractive company. Rail buying the B&M. So that company is now floating up. These two players really had a feeding frenzy there. Adrian goes back for the B&O, is able to secure at least one of those shares. Good. Pierre, NYNH. Rail is buying the NYC. Adrian probably should snag one of those. He does. Pierre rounds it out. And I think basically all the attractive shares are sold out now. I guess there's a few NYNHs left. Adrian is going to ignore that and go for the CPR. I don't understand the priorities for these shares. It is a $26 arbitrage IPO to market, but long term, the NYNH is going to be strictly better. Am I wrong there? Pierre also buying a CPR. Rail is got 2 shares in the NYNH. Adrian is still on the CPR kick, and everyone else is passing. Adrian's share locked and will pass. Keller ends up with priority. Yeah, I don't know. Adrian's been playing very well, and everything's been kind of coming up in his favor, but I question some of these share decisions. He's not that far ahead. He needs to still stay in this game. CPR gets into the offboard and has better revenue now, 150. CNO is, I guess, potentially trying to get into Rochester in this track that the NYC and NYH have locked down. I think that should be pretty easily avoided. There's plenty of upgrades that should be able to totally shut that down. It would be 2 track points to lay this tile here, and then never has to worry about it again. We'll see. Pays for 240, NYC. This also blocks, but there is an opening here that could be accessed. It'll take more track points for the other players to get there now. So I think it's reasonable. I hope that he does this so that his NYNH can block the B&M here. I would really like to see that, if he's not going to focus on totally shutting this down, I think he needs to also shut this down. He is being attacked from multiple directions and he only has so many track points, so it is understandable if he's a little bit struggling to prioritize what to lay. He is going to token New York, so I guess he says that he doesn't care if B&M gets a run there now. He is pretty invested in the B&M. I think he has 3 shares there. So, yeah, I guess letting him into New York is almost as much of in his favor as it is for Pierre. So, as long as he doesn't cut his runs, he's fine to let him in. And with a D train, the NYC actually can run into Boston too. So, all right, I see the logic. I've criticized Adrian a couple of times on his track decisions and then had to walk it back. This is another example of that. Running for 310, PRR, getting into Chicago, and revenue is going to be $50 higher as a result. B&O, looks like he's still interested in heading towards the offboard 360. NYNH, I'm not sure where he's heading with that. Maybe just hoping to block the CPR from ever getting into these single hull cities. B&M does get into New York, and Adrian's probably fine with that. But as noted, PR is going to have to withhold at least twice here to stay yellow. So I don't really agree with the decision to buy those shares. Erie, suitcased CPR, upgrading Barry. Does have potential to get into these double O's now. Needs to be blocked by the NYC and NYNH. CNO still, I think, heading towards Rochester, or at least this northern loop of track that has been created. Nobody else is helping him though, so should still be blocked. NYC links up with Barry, and because he has the tokens, he is actually going to just token it and take advantage of all this track. So his run is going to be really nice now. He got into Boston, and now he can take all advantage of all the CPR track too. That's really nicely done. His run is 460. Great news for him. PRR. Now these players are cooperating a little bit to get into this track, and I don't know. I think that Adrian could have prevented this. The B&O is going to be up next, so if he lays a tight turn here, this is going to be bad news for Adrian. A lot of these companies have tokens, so they can token Rochester and start cutting his runs up. B&O, he is not he's not going to cooperate. So he does lay down in Columbus and doesn't lay the sharp turn. I wonder if Adrian can block this anyway, though. He can't run this segment of track, so he's not going to be able to lay this city, I don't think. Actually, well, the NYC could, but the NYC is already operated through Pittsburgh. So he actually can't do anything about this. That's a little bit of a missed opportunity. B&O pays for 360. NYNH is heading down towards this. He really needs to make sure that a sharp turn gets laid here so that the Erie suitcase isn't broken. B&M gets an upgrade and does have cash for Scranton, so the B&M may be able to join the party and actually start running west. Only possible because the B&M had to withhold anyways to stay yellow. Erie, still suitcase for now, but is under pressure here. This may come to an end. And if that Erie suitcase is broken, I think that Adrian might surrender a victory here. It's going to have to buy an expensive train, and it really doesn't have good track. He also will be forced to lose that company because it's already in brown. So that's going to be a disaster for him if this suitcase is broken. He needs to make sure that doesn't happen. He should be able to do it. CNO can't lay any track. CNO can link in, but can't lay this track. So the NYC is going to have an opportunity, but that's his last chance. CPR pays for 160. CNO does get the link in. NYC and is blocked. Okay. So this track could have been laid a long time ago. He left it to the absolute last second, but there's now no possibility of the Erie suitcase being blocked or broken. So Adrian should feel pretty secure there. His run's still 460. But he needs to be a little bit careful. A token in Rochester could be painful for him. There are some valid upgrades that could allow him to bypass it, but We'll see if he's able to finagle those or if these other players are going to start cutting his runs. PRR doesn't have token money, is going to not even lay track, guess giving up. B&O gets into the off board and his run increases by $20 as a result. NYH, not entirely sure what that is. I think that he probably needs to be looking at this Rochester bypass, doing this upgrade instead of this. I don't think this gets him anywhere. NYH is running for 270, so $20 increase of revenue, I guess, is what he gets for laying that. B&M gets into Scranton. And I think that Adrian may want to look at these two track tiles now and look at blocking the B&M. Does have token money. B&M withholds again, so that's 3 withholds actually. That's not necessary to stay yellow. Erie, suitcased, stock around 8. So we'll pause here for a moment and just assess the game state. Adrian is still in the lead. He's leading Rail by $250. He has 4 shares on Rail, but he is cert locked, so Rail should be able to pick up some ground there. Adrian's got good runs, but they are under a little bit of pressure here from Pierre. Speaking of Pierre, he's in a pretty distant 3rd place, has a lot of share deficit to come back from, and there's really no shares available other than N1NH. So probably out of this game, and then Keller was eliminated on the D train. So it's going to come down to Adrian and Rail, and we'll just have to see if Adrian's able to keep his runs alive for long enough. Keller buys a CPR. I guess I missed that that share was available. I think the NYNH is strictly a better share, probably. Pierre gets that, and now there's no shares. So Rail is not going to be able to make up his stock deficit after all. Looks like everybody else is passing, and we're into 8.1. Looking at the market, the game should end in this set of operating rounds. So I think Adrian's got this. We'll see if he's able to defend his runs. C&O does get the B&M into the main set of track. Runs for 240. CPR looking to, I guess, threaten to get into this 00 here, or potentially loop back around and get into the line of track into Albany. Pays for 160. NYC blocks the access here. But I don't know if the threat is really the CPR. I think the threat's the B&M. Runs for 580. Really good revenue there. PRR laying some interesting track there. B&O running for 410. So he's able to run all this track just as well as the NYC now. Map is really opening up. NYNH upgrading Scranton. B&M is going to cut the run of the NYC. So this was a long time coming. It took a lot of withholds to make happen, but this does hurt the NYC. I don't know how much it really hurts him though. He loses access to this DIT. Well, really he loses access to both these DITs and all this track up here, but he can still run down into the offboards. So we'll see if his run actually changes all that much. B&M is paying out. Erie, suitcased. CPR, not sure where he's heading. Just 160. C&O is able to increase his run by $20. And Pierre has withheld a ton of times on the B&M, but unfortunately still doesn't have cash to lay a token with the C&O. I don't know that that C&O token alone would be much value. He would have to probably token in Rochester, which has already been bypassed. But yeah, we'll see. Pays 260, and he's going to shuffle a train out of the B&M. So these shares that Adrian was buying in the B&M really have not paid. C&O has 2 5 trains now, and the B&M is halfway towards a D. I'm not entirely sure what Pierre is doing here. The bank should still break, I think. But I guess if Pierre doesn't run, it's going to be close. We'll see. NYC running for 480, so he does lose $100 on his revenue as a result of that token. I think it was preventable. I think he dropped the ball a little bit in allowing the B&M to get over there. Pays 480, PRR, random track, B&O running for 420, NYNH This is all just turning into spaghetti here. I don't think there's any real significance to changing routes there. B&M is trainless and does emergency by the D. Does that extend the game? Under $3,000 left in the bank. My usual heuristic is $6,000 in a operating round or set of operating rounds, but I was forgetting that the Erie is not actually a company, so there's only 7 companies running, and the B&M didn't run this operating set. So I think Pierre may have been successful in extending the game here. We'll see if that changes the outcome in terms of the winner, but I think that he was able to change the game end, and he's not going to win if the game ends here, so I guess he has to do that. The bad news for Pierre and the rest of the table is that Adrian is the majority investor in both of his companies. So the C&O is going to have a great run now with 2 5s, and the B&M with a D is going to have a good run too. But Pierre is not going to win. He's too far behind. And Adrian is the next greatest beneficiary of that. So, yeah, I think extending the game probably doesn't have much effect. CPR, don't know where he's going. 160. C&O, this will be interesting. 2 5 trains and is running for 500. Wow, that's really nice. And these high revenues, maybe the bank does break. We'll just have to see. I'm not going to try and theory craft it. $2,300 left with 5 companies to go. That's probably a tall order. Not all these runs are going to be 500. 480, pretty close to 500. PRR, 290. Yeah, the bank's not going to break. B&O is running for 420 again. NYNH, 280. B&M, first D run here is 310, not half bad. And the bank does not break by $500. So Pierre was successful in extending the game. If we look at the revenue here, Adrian is far and away in the lead. He's $700 ahead of the closest competitor, and he was running for the most throughout those operating rounds. So I think the extending of the game here is meaningless. I think Adrian still wins. There's nothing really going on in this stock round. Adrian was high enough in priority that he probably wasn't all that worried about a dump. In theory, the PRR was dumpable. But as we've seen in the 1830 tournament, a dump here probably just costs Rail paying shares. There's nowhere else to put his money. So a dump of the PRR is really not in his interest. And now that I look at it more closely, the CPR is operating ahead anyway, so it'd be very hard to dump the PRR. All right, so no dumps are going to happen, and we'll just skip the stock round. Into operating round 9, the bank will definitely break in this set of operating rounds. So in terms of liabilities for Adrian, who I think is going to win this game, there's tokens on the PRR and the C&O. If they both withheld and both token the same spot, in theory they could cut his runs. But by withholding, I think they're just going to lose the game for themselves. So I don't think there's any way for anybody to change anything, and it just comes down to whose runs are enough. But Adrian is far enough ahead. He's 700, almost $800 ahead. I don't think 3 ORs are going to be enough. So let's just see. Look at the spreadsheet. Adrian is running for more than anybody else, so he's won the game. All right, we'll skip to the end. Congratulations to him. I think his mid game was great, but I think he dropped the ball a little bit in that stock round where he was buying shares other than the high revenue shares and really focused on the yellow shares. Don't think that was the move. And then after that, the operating rounds got a little bit rough for him. I think that his blocks were subpar. He did maintain the Erie suitcase, which is something that we haven't seen in a long time on the channel, and kudos to him for that. I think he definitely would not have won without that. So that is a slick play. But I think letting the B&M in and not being able to prevent the other companies from opening up this track was a mistake. Now, granted, he does have 3 or 4 companies attacking him from multiple angles, so maybe he was never going to be able to totally block them all. But I think that we have identified at least 1 or 2 scenarios that could have made things better for him. Rail is in second place, and I got to fault him a little bit for giving Adrian priority as much as he did. I think that was a big part in Adrian's win. Adrian, having priority and able to secure the Erie presidency ended up being super important. Pierre and Keller, harder to say. Keller was eliminated on the D train, so his game was pretty short, I would say. And then Pierre, I think he played fine. I don't think extending the game was worthwhile or impactful in any way, but he wasn't going to win if the game wasn't extended, so I guess reasonable to try. And I think he played just fine. So congrats to Adrian, and he is going to be in round two. If we look at the bracket here, I am looking at table four where he'll be and seeing that if I win my game, I'll be playing him. So I will hope to see him there. Of course, there's no guarantee that I win, but I am really hoping so. Thanks for watching.